Well, everybody, I am so excited. Once again, we're back to reviewing Rings of Power. Yay! No, that's not best
Yeah.
negative. Oh no, Rings of Power. Yay! I'm going to center it awkwardly. We'll find out how
Hold
this
on. I'll
edits.
be right back. I gotta get my.
Ross is getting his stuff together. He's getting presentable. Uh, Good lord, we have returned for Rings of Power. I know everybody is excited for a show. We need to. I found it might be helpful to have a discussion before this episode review begins about uh, reviewing and I guess bias and that sort of thing. We've probably mildly talked about this in the past, but I thought about. Um, See, here's the thing when it comes to stuff that's already got established content, that you're going to measure it against the ruler that
Exactly.
is Lord of the Rings or the previous content, and how
Yep.
because we've been leaning into a fairly negative perspective of this show, and I've been trying
Yeah.
my best to be just fair and try and judge it, but the problem is it's hard to do that when you have preconceived notions, which happens a lot when you're using an IP that's already got established content, and how
See,
difficult it
that,
is to be
that's
fair to a show like this. Go ahead, Jason.
well, it's one of those things that cuts both ways, especially in this kind of situation. You have an established fan base, and so you have you have an audience, a ready audience that will consume your product. All you need to do is serve them up something that is in line with what they expect, and you're golden. The thing is that, like I said, that cuts both ways, because the minute that you deviate at all from what is expected by your target audience, you're going to get backlash. Now, the unfortunate thing is you're almost always going to get backlash in a situation like this, because what I expect from your show is not the same thing what you expect from the show. No fan is going to be totally 100% on board with every single thing that you're going to do. Not a single one. And so your job is to, in again, this is in my mind, in my opinion. I realize that that this is not necessarily the way that they're thinking of it, but their job is to mitigate the disappointment that the fans are going to feel because Radagast the Brown was cut from Lord of the Rings, or there's no Tom Bombadil in the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies. Whatever it is, um, but at the same time, at that point, you don't, as a writer, as the showrunner, as whatever it is you're going to call yourself, you don't get to innovate. You don't get to introduce new stuff, because when you do, the fans are going to come down on you and they're going to say, no, that wasn't in the lore. What are you doing? That's not in my head canon. That's not the way
Well,
this is supposed to be.
one thing I might modify that point as, because you've got a fair point, but let's say Lord of the Rings, widely beloved movies, and they did
Yes.
change things, and I
But
suppose I would alter what you said in a sense of, it's not that they don't get to make changes, it's just if they do, they are subject to criticism because we've already
yes.
got established lore that says it should be in another way. So if you don't do it in a
Right.
way that makes logical sense or helps the story progress or works within the world or yada yada yada, and if you make changes because you think you're being artistic or you've got some sort of political agenda or whatever, then that subjects you to criticism, whether fairly or not, because one of the biggest problems when it comes to reviews is you have expectation. There are expectations, especially when it's established IP, of what we think we should be getting, and so with that we carry
Right.
a bias into the content. What's that?
Right. You and I have talked about the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies over and over and over, because we both liked them. Now, you know that I have some criticisms of the movies. I don't 100% think that they're, they are the best Lord of the Rings adaptations. I like them more than the rotoscope version that was from years and years ago.
How dare
Um,
you? What, you don't like the
but
Balrog guy inside a suit walking around awkwardly
With butterfly wings? What do
with
you mean?
butterfly
yeah,
What's wrong with that?
wings?
that was 10 times better than the one that Gandalf fought in the Mines of Moria and Peter Jackson's. Let me tell you.
Oh, I
Um,
was afraid. I
but
felt
the
fear
thing
that
is,
day.
is that the thing is that regardless of my the criticisms that I have, I feel that they're slight, they're nitpicks. They're things like Gandalf's sword glowed blue as well. In it was an elven blade made for the Goblin Wars, just like Bilbo's blade was. And so when Frodo's glowed, Gandalf should have too, but they didn't put that in the movie. Um, But again, that is such a minor nitpick. It's one of the things that I notice about it, and I think it should be there. But it's like, it's fine. They wanted to make Frodo's sword a little bit more special. That okay, I'll give him that. Just things like that. That to me, it's like it's fine.
Well, we're
Um,
retreading. This is in greater context to the fact
yes,
that we're reviewing a show called Rings of Power that
right.
$500 billion
And
was
what
spent
I'm
on it, or $1 million, and 500 million to buy the licensing, and that we are dealing with the fact that, because it's funny when people talk about content that they like or dislike it, we exist in a weirdly narcissistic world when it comes to consuming content,
yeah, very
because
much so.
the, and inherently your opinion on a show is narcissistic in and of itself, because it's about you and your
It
opinion.
is yours. Yeah,
But the problem is when you review a show, and let's say we're negative towards a show, and let's say you like it or someone else might like it, um, the current attitude is that people self-identify with the media that they consume. So when I
yeah.
say I don't like your show, they hear I don't like you, your values, and everything that you're about, because people internalize all of the content. It's almost like
It's so
if somebody
dumb.
comes out with a song and they're like, "This song means everything to me." It's like the Beatles. I think the Beatles suck, but the problem is the Beatles are widely considered to be a beloved band
Oh yeah,
worldwide. People are obsessed with the Beatles, and so when I tell somebody, "Oh, the Beatles suck," it's almost like you see like a disgusted, hurt feeling on their face. They're like, "Ugh." Because they don't know how to deal with the fact that something that's that beloved, somebody might not like. And it's almost like I'm pointing to them and say, "You suck. You're an awful person for the things that you like." And in the contrast,
I mean,
the worst thing you can do
in
is walk around and say, "I don't like you because of the content you like or the things that you like." So we internalize things too much, and then we also get too hyper personal when it comes to criticizing people for the things that they like. Believe it or not, we are more important as individuals, your life, your personality, who you are, your values, and that sort of thing, than any media you consume, despite the fact it's larger than life. And oh, Lord of the Rings, and I live my life for Lord of the Rings. I know this is going to sound shocking, but whoever you are, you have more value as a person than any piece of media. And that somebody criticizing that piece of media, you shouldn't be taking personal. Sorry, Jason, go ahead.
yeah. No, I was going to say the thing is that um, when you say to somebody, "I don't like that one thing that you like," um, it can be viewed as a criticism of their of them because they chose that thing to like. You know what I mean? And so it's like, well, now you're questioning me as a person. It's like, no, I'm not questioning your judgment, whatever. I just don't find that thing appealing. You don't like the Beatles. I think the Beatles are way overrated, but I do like some of their songs. Not all of them. I think there's one album that I like.
Well, and this,
But at the same time, it's just I don't have a problem with some people not liking things that I like. because it doesn't matter to me.
Well, and this
Opinion on
opens up.
your opinion on something is fine.
Well, this opens up to a greater problem where people lack the capacity to have disagreement. And I'm not going to
Yeah,
go,
that's
oh, well, modern people and whatnot. But the problem is, it's like when we approach different things, when we have discussions about disagreements and stuff. The current, even political attitude is it's the echo chamber effect that you sit and discuss things that you like with the person that has the exact same opinions and attitudes and whatnot, and there's no push and pull, there's no contrast of perspectives. That in reality, we just like to have our opinions regurgitated back to us to make us feel good that we have the correct opinion and we are looking at things in the correct way. And I know I
Yeah,
would like to think that there's objectivity when it comes to things like morality and stuff, but when it comes to a piece of media like Rings of Power, it's really hard to to take away the fact that people are going to have differing opinions on something. Now, Ross will understand this reference, but do you think there's any possibility of pure objectivity when it comes to a piece of content and judging it fairly, basically whether or not it's good or bad, or are we only going to be subject to the subjective view that we all carry?
I mean, you can try to be like you can try to be as objective as possible. There will always be, I think, certainly with media, just because there's certain tastes that people have, but like there will always be, you'll have to fight your subjective taste on certain things. But I think you can look at things objectively. I will say it's harder in the case of Rings of Power because there is not only really strong, influential IP behind it, but that IP has been made into media that is very good, with
Right.
like in our lifetimes. Like that's going to be really difficult to do. Um, and kind of to Jason's point earlier, like Amazon wants to have their cake and eat it too, and it's going to be really hard for them to do that. Like uh, I don't know. I think you can. I think you can try and be at least as much as you can. You can try and strip away your subjectivity. It's going to be difficult though.
yeah. Uh, this kind of goes back to the point I was trying to make a little bit earlier when I was talking about the Lord of the Rings. It's because I knew about all that stuff that it was intruding upon me while I was watching the Lord of the Rings movies, and it was coloring my opinion. But in the fact that they were such minor changes, um, that in and of itself was allowed me to kind of set that aside as oh, it's just a minor change. It's not something that the
Well,
entire plot hinges around. Um,
well,
the other thing, go for it.
I mean, sure, but let's say we take away the Lord of the Rings IP from the show we're watching, and you
Right.
try and assess it just as a show. How is the plot progressing? How do the characters feel? Yada yada yada. I know it's hard to
So
devolve that, but even then, for example, Morphin Clark has a resting bitch face of a sort. And the problem is she has an inherent, I don't know what if she's told to act that way or what, but she comes across as abrasive and unlikable,
uh-huh.
just like she's got perpetual stink face, which I was talking about with my mother about because we're watching the show the other day. And it's like, it's hard not to approach her with a perspective that you dislike this character. And maybe that's what she's told to do, but I carry that negative, like knee-jerk initial perspective with me throughout the rest of the show where I'm like, I kind of don't like her. And it's
Yeah.
hard for them to win that back. I'd hate for me and Jason to dominate this too much. Silver, is it possible to be overly to be truly objective when we're dealing with something like this? Because we're getting very negative about this show.
I think no matter what you do, there's bound to be some of your, your own viewpoint kind of in there creeping in. I don't. That is incredibly hard to do 100%.
I agree.
Just looking at it objectively. So I think it's pretty much impossible. There's going to be a little bit of something at least.
Well, reflect on it, I guess, personally. How do you find watching the show? Do you find yourself constantly comparing it to other things? Do you struggle to be able to treat the show fairly in any way?
Oh yeah, I mean, like we already said, the original Lord of the Rings series, the movies were really good. And then you get to this and it kind of shatters everything. You're like, oh, it's as good as that one.
Do you
But
think
what about
it sours the show as you're watching it?
like the original?
Well, right. But
No,
the
shows,
the
you mean?
fact that you like The Lord of the Rings, is it souring watching this?
Oh yeah, it probably most likely does. It's hard to look at it as if I didn't know of the original Lord of the Rings and just went into this. I kind of have the feeling that if I just watched The Rings of Power and hadn't watched Lord of the Rings, I still wouldn't like it. But hard to say for sure. Again, because I have the impression of the original show.
Hmm.
I tried very hard with this episode that we're going to talk about today.
It's got problems.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
I tried very hard not to bring my biases into it. I tried very hard not to think, oh, this, oh, that, and compare it to like other things. I did at one point look up when Mithril was discovered, or at least when it existed in the Lord of the Rings, because I was like, well, that's kind of weird that they're saying they just discovered it now in Moria, and it hadn't like. I was like, okay, well, that seems odd. But
it existed before this in
did-
the lore, by the way, but whatever.
Yeah, it did. It did. It was actually found on Numenor as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway,
Completely changes
but I
everything.
very much tried to like take a step back. I still did in a couple of places do some comparisons and stuff. Like I said, I did end up Googling Mithril and things. But I tried more than I had in the previous episodes.
Okay. Well, I thought it was worth at this somewhat midway point to reflect on how we're approaching the content and how difficult it is, to be fair, because we are getting quite negative. And look, if there's story problems and there's plot problems or something doesn't make sense, which happens a lot in this one, which I thought made it worth having this discussion, then it's valid to bring up. But at its core, this is simply our impressions and our reviews of what we thought, and that's the best we could do. We're not writing an essay on the subject. At any rate, let's get right into the review. We start out with Queen Regent Muriel hanging out with ladies, and apparently she's having a mother sit down and get together in like the royal chambers, I guess. Where
They're blessing the babies.
like hugging.
well,
and doing.
it's
It just seemed an odd place to
Yeah,
do
I mean-
it.
Yeah.
it's a dream.
Well, yeah, I'm getting to that. But they're
Because,
having
yeah,
this.
like at first I was like, why is she alone with all these people? Wouldn't this be in front of people? Like what?
But yeah, they get a little earthquake, and she's like, "Oh, it's fine." And then she walks to the window, and a massive like wave comes in and a flood, and she wakes up. She's like, "Oh, a bad dream."
She fell asleep on her chair, by the way, and her freaking maid didn't say anything. That seems really weird to me.
Yeah, but foreshadowing.
Please.
It seems like they're heavy-handed foreshadowing.
Definitely foreshadowing. I mean, yeah.
Let's not predict what's going to happen in Numenor.
Yeah.
The show is trying to
I'm trying not
foreshadow
to.
possible
trying not
events.
to.
Yeah, Jason, pull it in. So yeah, it seems like they're trying to say, "Hey, a warning. dreams about a disaster or whatever could befall. She's worried about this. They wouldn't show it. It's the problem with those sorts of things is if it's shown in the show, it's going to have importance. If she was just having
Yeah.
bad dreams, they wouldn't show it.
Right.
Unless it's like it's important to her character who has regrets and doubts, but they're not elaborating on her character's personality that much anyway. Well, we move on to character that doesn't exist in the lore, Isildur's sister, whose name is Eärien. I forget how to pronounce it. But she's hanging out, and Pharazôn is, I think they call him Par Pharazôn, is walking around, and he's with his son, and he's counseling him about what it means to be a leader, and yada, yada, yada. And it looks... I'd hate to be overly political with this, but it looks like they're having an anti-immigration rally where they're standing out.
Oh, yeah. I was going to bring that up.
Where he's standing out screaming about immigrants and
The elves are going to come take our jobs.
well, it's not just a. Let me at least stand back and observe this in an objective way. It feels strange to immediately start triggering some sort of concern about elves immigration dominating the island because they don't die and they could tickle your gerbs and all of that stuff when they haven't had an elf visiting there for decades. They see one elf showing up in a nation
Doesn't
of
want to stay there.
Hold on, staying in a nation of perhaps millions. They see one elf and immediately there are anti-immigration rallies that are going to take all their jobs. It's like no immigration has taken place. Like Jason said, she wants to leave. It's, I don't want to say this is a deliberate effort to do some sort of political wink and a nod or over-exaggerate some sort of nativist perspective on, wow, we don't want those stinking elves, despite the fact that Numenor is oddly diverse for a cloistered society. But it seemed odd that immediately he's like, screw them elves when they haven't seen one in how long? And they're all going to take a okay. All right. Anyway, go ahead, Jason.
That's what I was going to say. The thing is that scene made no sense. It was this knee-jerk reaction to an elf showing up when they used to be friends with the elves. They used to welcome the elves. Their first king is Elrond Half-Elven's brother, like literal twin. Not just like he's, my half brother by a, no, it's his actual brother.
Well, I don't care.
Their line of kings is descended from elves.
Well, I don't care so much for the, because the weird part is the show pitches the relationship with the elves as odd because it doesn't align with the lore. Because immediately it's
and
like
that's where I'm getting lost.
We don't trust the elves. She even presents it as the elves gave this to you, which isn't true. They give to the men, the gods give to the men for siding with the elves. And then they phrase it later on in the show. I don't want to jump too far ahead, where Galadriel phrases it as they used to believe in the elves. And it's like, they're not gods. They're just elves.
Like loyal to the elves?
Loyal
really
to the elves,
too.
yeah. And it's like, what do you mean loyal to the... Because if you're phrasing it that way, then okay.
Well, there is loyalty to allies.
Well, but it sounds like loyalty to a race of people that are always going to be right, but clearly not because Galadriel's there.
Yeah. I mean, it does in coming from Galadriel's mouth, it does have the context of more of a worshiper status than a we're on equal terms and we're friends status.
Yeah. Ross?
Well, I was going to say, another interesting thing about like the gerbs thing is it shows earlier in the series elves going to go get foreign labor to help them build a tower. So I mean, I
Well-
realize this guy doesn't know that, but it makes like it's just like, show. What are you trying to say? Like, I don't.
well, they
Okay.
want Numenor to come across as very bigoted. Because
Also, did you see the comment of the seawall by Farazan?
yes,
What seawall?
we're gonna build a wall.
What? Is this the Netherlands? What's happening? What do you,
We're-
or do you mean that wall?
They're gonna build a wall and make the elves pay for it.
That's right, and they should.
There's
Um,
something else with that scene.
Oh, and then he's like, "Drinks are on me." Like,
well,
what are you?
anyway,
Did you just bring a whole bunch of?
what's that, Silver?
Oh, dumb.
So the guy who's originally at the front, like doing this whole take our germs thing, that was the guy that was
Halbrand beat up.
right? That
Yeah.
yeah, Halbrand. I can't remember his name. So he knows that Halbrand's the one who tried to take his guild pin so he could get a job. The guy that's not an elf that was with the elf.
Yeah.
Shouldn't he be like, oh no,
Well,
foreigners,
Southlanders,
are gonna come in
The
and
low
take
men want to take our jobs.
Well-
Southlanders and instead the elves.
Well, and I got the impression that Ar-Pharazôn, who shows up and sort of he takes over in a dynamic way, the large rally, where he sort of becomes the populist figure who speaks for the group. Let's not be political, Jason. Who speaks for the group? And
No, I was just he was going to say, I'm not going to let that happen.
well, right. Anyway,
I'm with you.
but you get the impression when he turns to the guy who was in the front of the rally, you kind of get the impression that Farazan kind of instigated this.
Put him up to it, yeah.
Which is odd that it's also the exact same guy that had the kerfuffle with Halbrand, who at the bar was sitting there going like, "We don't trust your kind." This is literally the first like foreigner they've seen in a while. And he's like, "I don't trust your kind." And then Halbrand's like, "I'm going to take your women." And they go, "Rah, rah, rah, rah." And this happened in the last part. And then and then it's weird that at the very end, as Jason commented, that he just had drinks waiting in the wings and they just hand them all out. Like the
Wait, was this supposed
spontaneous.
to be shot in a bar?
Well,
Yeah. It's in the city. It's in the city square, and he has drinks.
you get the impression it's a spontaneous rally that was planned, and he had people waiting around the corner holding trays.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like how okay, all right. So clearly the intent is to display a bigoted Numenor that's there's scheming involved, that Farazan is behind everything, trying to instigate, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, that does seem what it is. Yeah.
And then Eadian, I pronounced that incorrectly. Anyway, the character that does exist in the books, that created solely for the fact that, as her actress says specifically, so that they can insert feminine energy into their family. But anyway, the girl who's in
Yes, it's
STEM
also neat.
is talking to Farazan's son. Because girls need to be in STEM, Silver. And he's schmoozing her again.
Not just that, but yeah, he's trying to get a date with her, which he does.
Which
later.
seems like a whole look. There's so much going on of importance in this world. Why do we give a flying fart about his son flirting with the daughter of Elendil? Like, okay,
No clue.
well, I hope this goes somewhere. I hope this adds something. This like a Romeo and Juliet, where the two sides don't like each other, but somehow blah blah blah. It's going to be dumb, which is taken away from the greater story that should be going on. But it sounds like season 2 is going in different directions because of the lack of success of this season. So who knows if this carries on in any way into the end of this season, or even into season 2. But let's not drag this on too long. We now cut to Galadriel talking to the Queen. Yeah.
You get the tempest inside me line,
Yeah.
finally.
Well, it's more important to address what she's actually trying to get out of her here.
Mhm.
Galadriel approaches and is basically petitioning her for assistance in helping people she's never met to take back the Southlands, as if Numenor, a cloistered society, would give a crap about the Southlands. Like, I don't know how she thinks she's going to convince her.
Yeah.
Like, petition her. You were friend of the elf once. Commit a lot of your troops to war and death to help me in my quest. It's like, what? Like there's a lot going on in the scene that I'm not elaborating or articulating as much. Ross, what do you think?
Well, it's just like, once again, and we'll get into like a scene a little bit later, but like this Galadriel. I mean, and again, oh my God, see, I assume this woman is the same age or older than Elrond. Now I know how old she really is
She's
in the
much
lore, but
older.
let's
Should be.
ignore that. Considerably
She's
older, like
considerably older,
shockingly
yes.
older. But let's just ignore all that because, let's try to be fair.
Okay.
But has this woman never talked to anybody before? Like,
You get the impression.
generals
No.
back in the olden days, like they had to be kind of politically savvy, right? I mean, even today they
Yeah.
kind of are. Like, so she was general of the armies of the North. Boy, she just seems like kind of a raging dick. Like, what's her problem? Like, was she a cave woman? I mean, and we'll get to it in a later scene, but like somebody brings up like have you thought about doing it this way so you can like stab them? It's like, no, what's wrong with you? What are you, just like feral? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, oh my God, it's
She
so
comes
frustrating
across
because
as abrasive, as abrasive, and constantly makes demands.
yeah, in a way that like.
It's
Like,
like she's
what are you,
never
Mad
heard
Max?
of you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours.
Yeah, this is something that like in a different fantasy game, show or whatever, this would be like Mercenary Man, or the villain would be acting like
Yeah.
this. Like, it's so strange when she's neither.
Well,
Whatever. Anyway,
I just thought to myself, it would be interesting if Halbrand was sort of the catalyst of this, and he smooth talked this whole thing as a catalyst to trying to get this going, so that perhaps when the stuff gets revealed down the line that he was scheming to create this scenario that brought them farther into the story. But instead, it's just Galadriel being a villain of sorts.
It would have actually been interesting.
Well, and Galadriel's whole onus here is she still has her obsessive quest of fighting Sauron and trying to get to him, and she's convinced that Halbrand is the king of the Southlands, despite him making no claims to being the king of the Southlands. She's just like, you have this thing around you, you're the king, and he's like, he says nothing about it. She's like, no, you're the king.
He
And then
does.
she comes here and she's like,
He said, I got it from a dead guy.
and then she comes here and she goes, let's establish him as king. Come send all of your people to die with me to take back these lands for this guy who got sent to prison for like brutally beating a bunch of your citizens.
Yeah.
Like that, there's a lot of logical threads that fall apart in this episode where you start to go, why would they be convinced of any of this? Like, why would they care? And she's just approaching this in an abrasive, you will help me. And she's like, no. Well, elves and humans used to be allied. Let's ally again. And it's like, no. Oh, okay. But this scene's really important because it puts forward things that Galadriel wants and proposes this idea of what she wants out of Muriel and the Numenorian. She's trying to get more than just send me back to Middle Earth, which is what she demanded in the beginning anyway. Silver, any more thoughts on this discussion?
No, you're covering it pretty well.
Sweet. Well, it goes poorly. She turns him down. We get to Isildur being like, I don't want to go on the boating in my family boating business, and he gets distracted. He lets go of a rope. The guy in charge of the boat gets upset and
Yes.
kicks him out, as well as his 2-3 other friends
Two
or
friends.
whatever. And then they yell
Yeah,
at him
I mean,
for being a douche and doing this.
he did it on purpose. He admits that. He's like, I only thought I'd get kicked out. And to be honest, to be fair, that does seem a little heavy-handed. That he's like, yeah, I did it to get kicked out, and the officer decided to kick out you two guys who were just along for the ride. That's a total that's a total dick move right there.
Well,
Sorry, it just
this
is.
story, writing wise, this seems poorly done because it seems redundant. We already had him wistfully looking off into the distance and not doing his tasks. We already had this scene, so we're getting it again. And it's like, well, he did it because he didn't want to do it anymore, and he thought he'd get kicked out because he had to talk with. I don't want to do this anymore. You know what they could have done? Not had the first
Have
scene.
it
He talks to
resigned.
his dad and says he wants to quit. His dad says no, and then he purposely sabotages it. But this is literally the second time we've had him like wistfully looking out. It's like you've already told us this. Give us different
True.
things. Well, why are we repeating this scene? It just results in him. It's like, okay, we know he doesn't want to go into the boating business with his dad stuff. Like, it's a cliche story. We know. All right, move on.
We don't know how to do that.
No, Jason. Arendir is sitting there, and the guy we've all been waiting for shows up. And
Adar.
And it's Adar. He looks like an elf burn victim. And he seems to he's really jonesing for orcs, I guess. Like, he loves them. He caresses his head and
Jonesing for some orc love. You know what I'm saying?
some sweet orc
I need
love.
mercy kills one.
Yeah, he mercy kills one. And then him and Arendir has a conversation, model elf man. And he seems confused. He's like, "You're an elf. How could you be here?" I don't know what they're trying to do with the Adar stuff. Is he supposed to be sympathetic, like they deserve a place to live too? I'm sympathetic to these people who have been abused for a long time, who are described
Maybe.
quintessentially as evil. And in the show, by the way, when they talk about like the writings on that cloth, when it talks about where they're all supposed to go, it's like a place where the orcs can have a land of their own to, like, it literally uses the word like to go on with their evil whatever. So it even implies among them that they have evil intentions. So I don't know if we're supposed to think he's sympathetic to the downtrodden orcs, so we're supposed to feel bad for them, even though they're just evil. Like, I don't know what his motivation is. Like, he's just does he has dreams of power? Because he does say, he's like, well, you're not a god, and he's like, not yet. So he must.
Yeah, well,
Right.
and like the implication earlier being like, well, you don't know the real truth because the truth has been hidden. So it's like, oh my god, like, is he an orc hotep? Is that what he is?
I think he's supposed to be Sauron.
Well, the show
Obviously, we know.
By the way, Jace, because we haven't gotten to more,
Now.
but just to interject really quickly,
Right.
I think the show wants us to think that there are possibly a few
Yes.
people that are supposed to be Sauron. So we're supposed to think
Yes.
maybe Adar. We're supposed to think maybe the hobo. We're supposed to think maybe other people. So yeah.
Right, and that's what I'm just getting at. We know because it's already been revealed, but I believe that at this point we're supposed to think that Adar is Sauron.
Or possibly.
But yeah.
They want us to they want it to be a hint. Well, they have their little conversation. Not much happens. We move on to where the elves used to live in the tower, and you get a very strong impression that they're doing kind of a pseudo Helm's Deepish sort of thing. where it's like everybody's fleeing all the civilians to this keep, and they even do these
We're
overhead
gonna-
shots that look a bit like a Helm's Deep-ish sort of moments.
We're gonna get attacked by the orcs, so we need to
The bunker up,
get to
To get ready.
fortification.
and they're like, "We have
Mhm.
no food." Now this might come across as nitpicky, but so they're perfectly fine in the village. She sees one orc, and immediately she takes over and says, "We're all gonna flee." And so she picks up everybody out of nowhere, and they all run to the tower. Nobody, it must have happened in such urgency, as far as I could tell, that nobody grabbed any food. Nobody thought they would have to stay there in any length of time. It was so poorly executed that they literally have like 5 potatoes or something. Like they
Yeah.
just,
Can
yeah.
you imagine the scene
Pulls
where
out
they're
potatoes.
leaving Rohan and they just have nothing? Like they're
Yeah.
just
Once I'm
walking
done-
with nothing in their hands. Like what?
Yeah.
I
I mean, you could say that this is like, they don't understand siege. They've never been in war, so they don't understand. But this just betrays poor planning on their
Well,
part.
Can I also
I mean, if
say
you-
I think it has more to do with how this is put together as a show, because this
Yeah.
episode in particular had a lot of these where there's just weird jumps in time, in the space of as far as where they are. Like it's implied that they did bring food, but they've already gone through a lot of it because more people are showing up, and it's been, I don't know, a few days, a week.
Who knows?
But
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
it doesn't tell us, it doesn't show us very well, and
Could be
like
an hour.
suddenly we're just yeah,
Yeah.
and this happens multiple times in this episode specifically, where it's just like, oh, we're here now and they're doing that, okay, like it doesn't, and I think it's kind of, I hope this isn't a continuous problem with this show. I bet it's gonna be, but it just doesn't. I don't know. It's because that why not show us? Like tried to show us, but it's like the way they showed us makes it look like what, you showed up with a pocket full of potatoes. Like what's happening? Like what?
Yeah,
And they
if
just
one of
tried
them had just said something like, "We've been here for a week, and we've got more mouths to feed than we thought we would. We're running
they-
out of food."
And they kind of do, but I don't know. Hey, instead of that stupid rock smashing competition with Durin, they could have dedicated some screen time to them. Like any number of things. Like they waste screen time on very odd things.
They
Instead of
do.
that slow mo horse ride, show us some more of the plight of either these humans or like anything. The Numenorians training sailors, something important, or as we'll see later in the episode, Durin being hinky, like whatever. But
You're gonna
like,
tell me
suddenly it is.
You're gonna tell me the horse ride wasn't character building?
Uh, it certainly made me think her character's weird.
What?
No,
the thumbnail
Silver.
for episode 3.
It is the thumbnail. That was all Silver's doing right there.
Right here.
Well, and it's weird because the plan comes down to, let's send teenage boys to go back to the
No.
village where we still clearly got lots of food. Go back there and get some food. That's the plan. Send the incompetent teenage boys to go get this food.
The son proposed it and said, basically, he was like, "Let's go during the day. We'll go raid the village for food. There's still food there," which
There's
is
a lot.
totally bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently. And the mom shot it down. She's like, "No, it's too dangerous. I'm not going to let you go do that." And he and his friend sneak out and do it anyway.
That's fair. They didn't send them, but they're still stupid. And nobody, like, there's no adults. It's funny. There's this comment where she is ordering people around, and somebody said, "Who put you in charge?" And then they're like, "This was
Yeah.
a bad idea." And she goes, "Well, we all agreed." And I was like, when did you all agree? There was no vote. You walked into the tavern and said, "We're leaving." You took charge and said, "We all need to get out of here." And everyone's looking around like this was a bad plan. No one knows what they're doing. And then she implied everybody agreed. Like, it was odd.
There's a better way to put that, for sure. Like, and that's the other, like, some of the writing and the, like, how they speak to each other, it implies a different conversation's happened when it hasn't.
True. Things might have been cut for time. They spent so much money on this thing. Anyway,
Maybe.
they're in the village, and orcs show up. Oh no, orcs! And
Oh no!
his friend scurries off with his little wagon, and he jumps in the well. He runs away and he jumps in the well. Oh, and they notice that he has this hilt, which is apparently really important. And he's like, "Oh, you've got the thing I really want."
Blood magic on it.
Yeah, it's got blood magic. You got the thing I really want that you're obsessed with. I need it. So they become really obsessive about trying to find him. They're like, "Look everywhere," and he's hiding in the well. In the meantime, we cut back to Elf Kingdom, and I don't know how much time has passed, Ross. Like, they're already partway through a massive building project.
What is that, a month?
They
2?
said that the tower was going to take a long time to build, and suddenly they're halfway through it.
How much time has passed? Like, if you look at things like Notre Dame, it took more than one generation to finish. How long have they been working on this tower?
Hey, look, them dwarf workers, they can do it real cheap and they do it fast, man.
Well, here's the question then. So let's assume they're building it as fast as they naturally can. So however long that is that amount of time also passing in the other events that were getting displayed? So has Galadriel been on that island for 6 months or something? Has the drama happening in the village in the Southlands been going on for like 6 months? Who knows, a year? Has the drama with the Harfoots been going on for that amount of time? And if not, if that's not what's happening,
they're almost out of food.
Is this happening unsynced in time? Is the elven stuff happening at a different pace than everything else?
Yeah. See, that's the one, like, yeah, and that's what I was mentioning, like, kind of getting at, like, what is this skip in time? Like, what? Already you're this far? This is insanity. And you know what? They could have had, like, why not have a scene where the dwarves are showing up? Like, oh, here come the dwarven workers to get started. Like, maybe breaking the ground. And you could have had, because then not to get ahead a little bit, but then Celebrimbor mentions, like, hey, I think he might be avoiding me. Show that. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of
avoiding you.
Show.
It looks like he doesn't even come. Like, he's still back at Moria or whatever, Cause of Doom. Or, like, he's still clear. Like,
you're right. There's a lot of tell, not show. They just sort of say this happened, but it's like, okay, I guess. They have this weird discussion between Celebrimbor and Elrond, where he's like, "Your dad had Farsight, and he said you would help me do something grand or whatever." And he's like, "Oh," and then he's like, "I haven't seen Durin in forever." And then it cuts to he traveled a distance across the map and is in Khazad-dûm. It feels like a lot of time passes on the elf end, and like 2 days have passed in Numenor. That's what it feels like. But
the time frame does seem to shift much more for the elven stuff than it does for anything else. It seems that the other stuff, the Harfoots, the Southlanders, the Numenorians, it's a couple days,
week maybe. I don't know.
But with the elves, we're getting months, years, even.
And then you have.
Can I mention something real quick about Celebrimbor?
Absolutely.
Is it just me, or does he not act like an elf? He really comes off like British officer or something. Like, he's just kind of like quirky British man. Like, even compared to Elrond in the show. Like, I don't mean to like I'll keep it to the show. Even compared to like Elrond, like he kind of has this, regal aloofness to him, right?
Yeah.
But this guy's acting like a forgetful British man, like older British man. What is this? Like I don't. And especially if you bring in Lord of the Rings, like the movies.
None of
like,
them act like elves compared to Lord of the Rings.
No.
None of them do. No.
But I mean, he's especially bad. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. It really took me out of it because it's like, why is he acting like a people? Like
Yeah,
elves don't act like this.
That's an interesting point.
Anyway,
Elrond has suddenly traveled a distance and he's in Khazad-dûm suddenly, when it should take a while if you look at the map, but all right, whatever. He's suddenly in Khazad-dûm talking to Durin's wife, and he's like, "Where's Durin? He's doing stuff. Are you lying to me? No. Clearly you're lying to me." And that's most of the conversation that lasts way longer than it needs to. And it's like,
kinda.
well, all she
Yeah.
needs to do is he was like, he doesn't even need to talk to Disa. He just needs to show up. I'm looking for Durin. He's like, oh, he's otherwise occupied. He's like, oh,
Occupied.
and then he kind of
Well-
searches for him, and he's like, clearly they don't want to tell me, and then he finds him. We have
know
this
how I would've
long
shortened
drawn
it?
out. Well, what's that?
And again, I'm a well-known Hollywood editor, so
Oh, yeah.
take my
Famous
advice
Hollywood
as
editor Ross.
law.
Yeah.
Yep. So I just have him go in, have very chipper Disa be like, "Oh, he's not here. He's down at the what?" Like even had try and stick with the mine, like he's in the quartz mine, and then just have a scene where like a quick shot where Elrond looks over to the right or the left, and then you just have an insert
He's-
shot of the freaking axes all sitting there, the pickaxes, and then have him go like,
His tool's still there.
yeah, just have him look over at her and go, "Oh, well, thank you. Okay, I will." Just have him walk away, and then have him go scurrying around, all sneaky like, looking for him.
Because
Like,
if
Do
you
that.
you're absolutely right, and if you cut it that way, then you'll have more time to elaborate on things that you should be elaborating on, as opposed
Yeah,
to
because it shows that Disa's like lying to him, that she's covering for her husband, which is all you're trying to convey, and it shows that Elrond's smart enough to see right through that.
well, and
And
you
there
could
you go, boom, done.
you could add one moment where after he goes, "Oh, I see," and then he steps out of the room and he's standing in the hallway and he says to himself, "I wonder what he's up to," and then he goes looking for
Yep.
him. That way, he's
Yep.
very obvious. It's literally the comment to the audience. He's up to something. He doesn't want to tell me.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, so you have him squatting on a bridge, and then he immediately makes it to this little
In plain
cave.
sight.
Yeah. Apparently, he's super awesome at seeing things. And anyway,
Good-
what's
Good
that,
thing
Rob?
Doran doesn't know that elves have incredibly good hearing. It's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Elrond, what do your elf eyes see?
Well, he finds Durin in a orange lit room, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "You're trying to get my." It's weird. I don't know what Durin constantly treats him in these weird ways, because it's like, "You're one of my closest friends ever." He's like, "What are you doing? I don't trust you. You're to steal everything from me." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "I don't. All right." And then he's like, "Swear on me on this really important swear by touching the mountain." He's like, "All right." So they touch the mountain, and he's like, "I've got the secret metal." And at no point is Elrond like, "Oh, this is amazing," or whatever. He's just like, "Oh, okay. Like, why don't you tell everybody it's cool? You should make stuff out of it." And he's like, "Well, it's really hard. My dad doesn't trust me." And he's like, "All right." And then he sees it, and he's like, "Well, that's really cool, Durin. You took this way seriously. I guess you should have. But here's your little rock." And he's like, "Actually, we're friends now. You can have it." It's weird. It's like, are you close friends? Because the first thing he says is, "I don't trust you. You're here to undermine me and steal things from me for the elves." And he's like, "What?" And then he gives it to him for no reason. You're supposed to be blown
Elrond knows
away.
what it is.
Elrond, well,
He's like, I believe it's called Mithril in your tongue. He's like, yeah, that's Mithril.
I think it might be implying that he translates it because they named it something like Gray something, and he's like, oh, it's called this, and he's like, no, the translation would be Mithril. So he might not know what it is what I'm saying. But there's a cave collapse, and then Durin runs back, and they're like, oh no, cave collapse. And I'm just gonna call her Isildur's sister, where she runs into Pharazon's son again, because the budding romance I'm supposed to give a fart about.
Yeah.
Now Galadriel's in prison with Halbrand, and they're having a conversation, and she's pacing back and forth, and she's
My
looking
favorite scene.
Ross's favorite scene. Well, describe the scene for us, Ross.
So she's just pacing back and forth, which I thought he was going to be like, "Could you please stop? This is driving me insane." But then she just like, and I watched this very late, so bear with me if I don't get everything right. But she's just kind of like, so it didn't work out for you, huh? And she's like, no, she didn't give me what I wanted. And it's like, yeah, it's because you were a dick. And, like, and he tried to explain to her, like, maybe you should try, like, why did she throw you in here? Well, because I asked for this. He's like, why would she do that? That makes no sense to piss her off. What'd you actually say to piss her off? So what'd you say after that? She's like, well, I want to talk to the real king, her father. And he's like, huh. And she mentioned, like, he's like, so the thing you want to do to get people on your side, if they're afraid of you doing something, is to know that fear and assure them that you will not do that. But before he has a chance to finish that sentence, she's like, so I can use it against them? And you're like, what? What's wrong with you? Like, what? Were you raised by, like, barbarians? What's happening? Like, how are you an elf that is, like,
thousands of years old?
Like, even if I didn't know that, you are a grown woman raised in a very, like, very, I don't want to say strict, but, like, very formal society, a very, very, everything's done a certain way. How do you not know this? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, oh my God.
You know what? I had a sight before you continue on in my mind when you were talking about the fear and stuff. It's like I imagine Galadriel is it hiding in the sewers, like trying to consume kids' fear.
Hi, Georgie.
We all float down here because we look up.
Oh
Oh
my
my
God. Oh no.
I kind of imagine her conversations with like the queen as like a Pokemon battle. Like if she'd only use compassion, it would be very effective.
Well, which is why, like last week's episode, I kept bringing up how come every conversation feels confrontational. Anyway,
Nobody
sorry,
can have a
Ross.
decent civil conversation.
Ross,
No, you're
continue.
good.
Go ahead.
So yeah, anyway, down comes Pharazon. He's like, oh, she's made her decision for you, and with 3 dudes and
Three dudes that are so much bigger than her.
Yeah, they've got a lot
So
of
much
armor
bigger.
on, and she kung fu's them very comically into
Easily.
the cell, and
One guy just
She
walks
wants to-
in, by the way.
yeah, oh, oh, okay.
I only
And it's like-
remember her
We're going into the cell now.
What's that, Silver?
I only remember her touching like even one of them. Or maybe
Yeah.
like she kind of like shoves one of them and then touches another one's back. But
Yeah,
other
lightly
than
on
that,
the
they just
shoulder.
walk into the cell.
Yeah.
Well, as an overall,
If she actually physically tried to push those guys, we would have watched her move herself further away from them, and they couldn't have that.
well, to address this as an overall point of the kind of tiny action scene, there are 2 things to discuss as far as I can tell. Firstly, is the sort of it's implied that she's this awesome warrior who throws them around effortlessly, and then she does this like smug look where she's like, "Uh-huh, I did that shit right there." Like you can't do anything to me. What do you do about it? And it's this weird sort of, it's the writing you get oftentimes with women in action scenes, where instead of displaying a woman in a realistic manner, maybe beating a person in a fight or overcoming another individual or whatever, they simply write her in as being stronger and better, even though realistically, visually, it doesn't make any sense. Like she's like 100 pounds soaking wet, and these guys are wearing full armor. There's no way she sort of moves them. And it's like, well, she uses
No.
their momentum against
Not a
them. It's
chance.
like their momentum running into the jail cell is what you're telling me. She has
The
no
momentum
leverage. She has no
That they
strength.
stopped using.
Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say they had no momentum. I mean, obviously they had momentum coming in, but then they stopped in front of her jail cell and opened the door. Their momentum was gone at that point.
And it's a writing failure when people write women in action scenes where they just sort of go, well, she does what the men can do, despite not being remotely strong or as large. Like even if you're like, well, she's an elf, she's got compact muscles or something. And it's like, okay, she can't weigh more, even if she's an elf, right? So she has almost no pull because she's so much smaller. Like she needs to fight in a different way because she's clever and she's very skilled. But instead, it's like they write, she outmaneuvers them and pushes them into a cell and then gives this douchey grin. Like, and it's like, okay, like it's how incompetent are your soldiers?
Incredibly. I mean, what?
Yeah, very incompetent.
It's such an
I
odd
feel like that could
scene.
have been done simpler if she was like being led out by the guards and she kind of slipped by them toward the back of them, where they didn't even have to have any momentum. If she ever used like magic or stuff, which you'd expect elves would, and she like magic blasted them into the cell, that'd make more sense.
Yeah, or they're escorting her to wherever she needs to go, and she's faster than them, and she scampers up a building, and they just can't go with her because they've got armor and crap on. That would make more sense.
Like, ah, darn it, the cat's in the tree, can't get it.
No.
Well, we cut to Isildur's sister, who's not important, talking to Isildur about how he lost his boat job. Anyway, Queen Muriel
And his friend's boat job for some reason.
and they're for
Yeah.
no fair reason whatsoever, in a very unfair manner. Muriel's in her dad's chambers. Just Galadriel is there. She's just there.
Well, Galadriel goes in, and Muriel is there because of something Halbrand said in the cell. Halbrand told Ar-Pharazôn that basically, you know where she's going, so get there.
Well,
And that's why Muriel is already there.
that's not
waiting
my
for her.
point. It's implied in the conversation that he's being cloistered and separated because they removed him from office. How does she just get in there?
And
She
how does
doesn't
she
even
where
know-
he is?
Precisely, she doesn't know where he is. Like, there's
What, you
just
think
a
there
lot
should
of
be
like,
guards? What do you mean?
there's a lot. Like, you could have even given me a scene of her walking in.
Oh. Well, I thought there was one where she's climbing up the tower or like into a window or something.
Was there? I
But
didn't. I didn't know because
Yeah.
if there was,
but the other thing is though, how did she know which tower it was? There's a few. Unless I missed a scene in a different episode, because that would have been the time to do it. Is have Isildur's father be like, "Hey, so anyway, as we're walking by on the left here, you see the tower where our king is kept, our old king."
that's something
Yeah,
they could have
there's
said before.
Instead, we got a slow-mo of her goofy face on a horse, so I'm really glad they made that decision.
You're right. She does. As I'm reviewing this, she does climb the tower. It's just there's this. So it shows sort of this CGI figure in the distance, and then it shows her jump through the. She jumps through the window, and glass goes everywhere. And this might be nitpicking, but it's like, did you physically jump through, and your jumping through broke the glass? Like, wouldn't you see glass shatter and fall, and then she step in? It sort of displays as if she jumps through the window with her own
It was pretty
force.
shattered.
Right. That's the impression I get.
110-pound woman, makes sense.
At any rate, we're getting in the weeds of the silliness of overly nitpicking everything, but there are major flaws in this episode. She's
Get the
talking to
glass and
Muriel.
bounce off.
Absolutely. She's talking to Muriel. She's like, "Oh, your dad. I need to talk to your dad." And they have this interesting conversation about the events that happened in Numenor and why things are the way that they are. Apparently, her dad wanted to reconnect with the elves, and everybody was so upset that they removed him from office and put her in under the premise of she's going to keep the status quo going. Is that more or less what happened?
Yeah, but it also sounded like her father was starting to become senile.
Yeah, the way I understood it was like, well, he was going more towards the elvish thing, right?
Right.
And
I,
then people didn't like it.
yeah,
Or are
and
we
they
not
just
there yet? I'm
removed him
sorry.
from office. No, we're there.
And I don't understand why they rebelled. Like they rebelled, but why? What was he doing that was so offensive to them? Like, they don't explain that. And that's another part where it's like you could have. I understand they're mad now, but because because as we get there, the implication we get is that those in power right now, Farazan and Muriel, are like creating this anti-elf vibe, right?
Right.
That's how it came off to me. So then, why were people, however many years ago, when old King Man was wanting to get more elf up in there, why were they pissed? Like, it doesn't explain. It doesn't. I don't understand any of it. It makes no sense to me. Now, maybe I'm just being obtuse, but okay.
Well,
But why?
and
What
it's
was the thing that they hated?
I find, because this will come up later, I find it very important to point out that he was removed because of his pro-elf attitude, his pro-immigration attitude, whatever.
Mhm. Yes,
that he was removed for that purpose, because it's important for the events that come later, because events come later make no sense whatsoever.
No, they don't.
um
The only thing that I can, there is one other detail that she mentions, but it doesn't really seem to fit either, and it's that like her father wanted to be right with the gods or something of that nature,
uh-huh.
and that but again, it doesn't really, it's like, seems to be implying that he was going senile and that's why he was starting to do these things. But I don't know, maybe I'm just picking that up. And
I didn't quite, I mean, he seems senile now, but I didn't quite pick that up
oh
before.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it might be. But regardless, Muriel's like, well, he had this Palantir, and if you touch it, you only see destruction. Um, eh. So she touches it, and it's like, oh, I'm seeing visions of destruction. I don't want to. Here's the problem. That's not what the Palantirs do. They don't give you visions and foresight. That's not what they do. And I don't know how to emphasize this more. That's not their purpose. So, if we accept the fact that that's not actually what Palantirs do, they're for communication and seeing movements of your enemies and that sort of thing. They're not for like seeing into the future and getting visions. But it feels like they put this scene in to have a parallel with what happened in Lord of the Rings with Galadriel and Frodo, where he sees into her little pool and he sees a future that might come to pass. And it seems like that's what they're trying to do with the Palantir. Is she reveals to her, it's like, well, this is what you see with this stone, even though that's not what would happen and it makes no sense. This is what you would see with this stone, is sort of a prescient visage of what the future might hold. And it's the destruction of Numenor, as far as I can tell. Right?
yeah.
Even though it bugs me that that's not what the Palantirs do.
Well, can I ask a question? Was I being stupid? But Galadriel is like, I've looked into these before, but then earlier Muriel was like, yeah, like there were 7, but this is the only one left. Do they mean 7 given to Numenor, or what is it?
Yes, 7 given to Numenor.
Oh, okay, that
yeah,
makes
Numenor
much more sense.
had 7, and they took. I don't recall that they would have lost all of them at this point. Like they had a few
Yeah.
when they made it to Gondor, and
Gondor had one. Minas Tirith had one. Sorry, that is Gondor. So Orthanc. Orthanc had one, and at least Minas Morgul, the city that became Minas Morgul, had one because that's where Sauron got one from.
the Tower of Amonsul had one.
Yeah, so there
That would have
that's
been in
4,
Arnor.
at least.
I think there was one in Fornost, but don't quote me on that. I think there was. So clearly they're moving off of the lore, but they're using something that's like, remember Palantir? Well, show this, because in the movie, when they pick it up, it's like they see Sauron, but the reason why they see it is because he has one, so he can see them and they can see him. It's meant for communication between locations. And they're built by Feanor, believe it or not. So it's like they misunderstood what their purpose was. Like, I know this is nitpicky. The show's not following the lore. It bothered me. I was like, that's not what they do. They're not like magic, like future scene stones.
It's not the gypsies' crystal ball.
No. Anyway, I've been having bad dreams. My dad wanted to reconnect with the elves. You need to leave because I've been giving the mandate to not do what my dad wanted to do. I'm not gonna be loyal to elves, even though that's a weird. Anyway, it's an important scene. Anything I'm missing?
Not that I can think of.
No.
She does reference fear.
Basically,
She's like,
she
you're
says-
making a decision based on fear.
Basically, she says, "I'm shipping you out."
Anyway, back to the
You're gonna
villagers.
get on a boat and you're gonna leave.
Back to the villagers in Not Helm's Deep. She's like, "Where's my son?" And it's like, "Oh, the friend shows up conveniently right when she was asking about him." And he's like, "Oh, well, he was supposed to be right behind me." And then it cuts to the village where they're still searching for him. And the orcs are so thorough that they're setting on fire and practically dismantling the buildings where they like are sitting in like rubble piles, because it shows an orc like standing on one of the rubble piles. And I'm like, wow, how thorough they must desperately be trying to find this thing. No one looked in the well? They're this thorough that they're dismantling the buildings. No one looked in the well.
Well, he did once,
They did right at the beginning.
but then
He
never
looks
again.
in the well, and doesn't find him there, so figures he's not in the well.
But they will literally tear houses down piece by piece. But don't look down that well again.
Don't double check.
Nobody wanted a drink of water during that whole affair, huh? All right.
Orcs don't drink water. That's disgusting.
Well, except for when he
Except
had the
one
thing
time
of
he did.
water. Yeah.
2 times he did in the show. Yeah.
Well, he gets out and tries to run away, and somebody catches him. And Arondir shows up, and he saves him by shooting an arrow, and then they go running off. And it's filmed kind of odd. Did anyone find how oddly the action scene was filmed as they're fleeing through the forest? Because I got the impression they were
It's going slow motion.
Well, it's not just a slow motion, that they were either 5 feet behind them or 400 feet behind them.
Uh-huh.
Like it was both
We're
at the same
close
time.
enough. They were close enough for Arondir to snatch an arrow out of the air that was almost going to hit the kid. But yet, when he returned fire, it was like almost a shot thunk.
Yeah, like right there.
It was almost like it was point blank.
Yes.
And did anybody else get the feeling they were really trying to recreate the last fight scenes in Fellowship?
Yeah.
Just me?
Oh, kind of they
Yeah.
need to get to the fords of Bruinen when the Black Riders are chased.
No.
No. At the
No.
end of Fellowship.
The Uruk-hai. When the Uruk-hai
Yeah,
are
the
fighting them on the
Oh, right,
banks
right.
of that river.
On the banks of the river where they. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of that. Maybe it's just me, but it reminded me a lot of that. That and when they're leaving Moria. I mean, it's probably just because of the slow-mo, but...
I have a hot take. Can I? Some of the dumbest scenes, in my opinion, in Lord of the Rings is the Legolas feats. I think they're dumb.
How dare you?
The surfboarding down the
How
stairs.
dare you?
Oh, that was so bad.
How dare you?
The defying physics
no.
to swing in an odd direction, get back on a horse. The doing
That
it,
was so weird. I slowed down that scene and watched it like
it looks
5 times,
unnatural.
trying to figure out what he was doing.
Well,
He starts to swing one way, and then suddenly he goes the other way and is up on top of the horse.
Well,
So bad.
I find them
Those scenes
absurd.
are art.
Silver, shove it. I find those scenes to
No.
be some of the worst stupid and it elevates him in a weird way to the point where he does these goofy like feats, and then suddenly he's practically godlike, like a superhero on the battlefield, where he's like taking out a Mumakil alone, or if you see in The Hobbit, he's like skipping along their heads, like he's running up bricks as they're falling. In the like he just gets elevated to some ascended godlike being, and it feels like because
Darn
Elf,
right he is.
Silver, keep it together. And it feels like because he's some godlike elf, that Arondir has to do absurd, amazing feats at the same time. And on top of that, they added very Zack Snyder-esque slow motion moments to give his feats this like, oh, dude, sort of like, ooh, look at the cool things he's doing. And I hate it. I don't like that
The
stuff.
CGI error was really bad too. That he pulled back, the one he grabbed. Ooh, looked real doo-doo.
But yeah, it's a very silly scene. We're supposed to feel a lot of threat. It's like, oh no. And his mom shows up out of nowhere, and I almost thought she was gonna like Lady Boss the orc.
Arrow.
And she's got a little sickle. But they flee, and because of vampire rules, the orcs don't follow out as the sun hits the field.
I was talking to my girlfriend about this. I always, as someone who hasn't read Lord of the Rings, and has only seen the films, and I always assumed the sun was to the orcs was like being out in the hot sun of a really like 115 degree, 20 degree day was to us. Like it kind of makes you feel
Yes.
sick and weak.
Yes.
Not that it literally burns you.
Right. That's how it is in the lore. They get
Okay.
they get weak in the knees. It blinds them because they're used to the dark and they're not accustomed to the light. It's something that they can withstand if they need to, but it does weaken them to the point
So they
where
could close a 40-yard distance into a sunny field and kill those people, is what you're saying?
they would have a hard. Well, yes, they could.
If they were motivated to, they
Okay.
could.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well,
But,
especially
I mean, that would give Arondir and Bronwyn an advantage against them.
Sure.
Because it would be like that they were fighting in a desert, in full gear and just sweating buckets and just really weak from like fatigue and stuff. They would have an advantage, but it's 40-3.
Well, we now cut to a scene which I think the filmmakers thought was really cool, where Disa is singing, I guess, to the mountain. Because this scene is depicted in screenshots for promotional stuff. It's also seen in trailer stuff, where she's just like, oh, and then like it's supposed to be super cool. We're supposed to be blown away that she's singing to the mountain.
The rocks and stuff are reacting to her voice. Elrond asks her later, what on earth was that?
Well, it's like she's singing for the miners that were caught in the avalanche.
The cave-in.
The cave-in. Don't correct me, the hurricane.
The landslide, the avalanche.
The tornado. Anyway.
Fire.
Tornado.
The tornado. So she's singing about it, and Durin seems really upset that his dad won't let him dig holes. And Elrond
basically tells him that he's not going to talk to his dad ever again, basically.
And Elrond's like, no, don't do that. And then immediately
he's like, I wish I could talk to my dad.
Well, and immediately, and it's a nice scene. Um, and immediately he's just like, "Oh, I regret that, and I'm gonna go apologize to my father." And he goes apologize, and his dad's like, "I'll always be on your side." Um, Small nitpick. Uh, During the Elder, I don't know what number he is at this point. I think the crown looks really stupid.
It's not great.
It does.
It's not the worst thing in the show prop wise, but it is not good.
It's like a
Um,
crown made for an orc. Like it's just very angle and poorly made, especially when the dwarves are supposed to be really good at like building things and making things.
They're master jewelers. Yeah, their
Yeah.
crown for their king might look like a helm or something, but you would be impressed by it.
Mm-hmm.
We make it back to Helm's Deep, and Arendir and Bronwyn are googling eyed, and then we see Bronwyn's son, whose name I forget, and he's all like, "I got this hilt," and it's like a metaphor for the One Ring or whatever, but it's really obvious. But we're not going to talk about that. Anyway, old man is like, "Oh, you got that thing I really like that you stole from my place. Well, it's really cool, isn't it? I know. Have you heard of Sauron?"
Have you heard the good news, son?
Have you heard the good news? Have you heard the good news of Sauron?
Mhm.
Well, okay. Anyway, we cut to Numenor again. Galadriel's leaving. They're all standing there, just like, go off our island. She's like, "That's your boat." They get in the boat, and everyone's pleased. And suddenly, flowers start falling, and they're like, "Oh, that's from the white tree." And it's so momentous a moment that she completely reverses everything possible. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have a serious question about this. Did they establish how important the white tree is, and that if something happens, it's vitally important to the soul of Numenor? And have they established this in this show, not another one, in this show? How important?
Yes,
Right-
right now. Literally
right
right that
now.
second.
Yes. She says
Literally.
something about the petals falling from the tree are like the tears of the Valar or something like that. Kind of
Okay.
implying that the gods are weeping.
But they haven't
this
established
point.
that people give that much of a crap about the gods anyway.
Right.
No,
they haven't.
and it also kind of, by the way, that doesn't that kind of go against the other thing, because they talk about like they got the island, like they rose the island up, when really it was a gift from the Valar, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but now we're going back to, well, it's from the Valar. So I don't. Okay,
Well, no,
which one is it,
they-
show?
they if I remember correctly, she says something along the lines of, "The elves didn't give us the island. We won the island. It was we won it because of our valor. The Valar gave it to us because of our actions, because of the blood we shed, not because of anything the elves did."
Yes, they did say that, but without the Valar part. So it implies that they took it. Like it implies that they, like, at least as I remember, I could go back and watch that episode and find that, but like, I don't know. To me, it feels very wishy, like flippy floppy, wishy washy. On
Well, it totally does. I mean, when she said that, and then the next scene, Galadriel walks in, I'm like, what on earth are you doing here? Why did you flip flop on this? It makes no sense, no sense at all.
Well, and here's my core
I mean,
problem.
even if they do think that is an omen, that the white petals falling from the tree, even if they think that is an omen, we have no importance
well, here's
connected to it from them.
Here's my main problem. So they haven't foreshadowed that, because they could have dropped hints in previous episodes how important the tree is to the people, to their spirit, to how they view things. Are very superstitious. They could have said something, but all we get is the leaves of the tree fall. Hey, everybody, we're going to war. And everybody immediately volunteers and agrees to it. Pharazôn is like, yes. And they ask for volunteers, and everyone's like, I'll do it. Immediately there's an about face, when not that long ago, They overthrew the king for siding with the elves because they wanted to be cloistered and they didn't want influence from outside forces or immigration, whatever metaphor you're going for. Not that long ago did they have rallies in the streets against elves possibly coming to this island because they want to stay cloistered. And suddenly leaves fall and they're like, yeah, we're gonna go to war for a sketchy reason of a guy we don't know if he's really a king with a girl that we barely met.
Yeah.
Someone help me understand what on earth just happened.
I told you. I can't help you there because it makes no sense. None whatsoever.
Silver, you own the secrets to the kingdom. What happened in the show? Explain to me the ending, please.
I can't.
Well, and hey, here's Hollywood writer Ross here. Coming back to you.
Oh,
Here's how-
welcome back.
Why?
Ross.
So they could have held on to the Numenorians do not trust elves. They could have held on to that and been like, "Hey, we want to help you. We know, like, clearly what we're doing is not the correct thing. We feel this now, but you cannot be the reason why we're helping. Like, we can't let people think that. So why don't they just take the Halbrand thing that Galadriel thinks and use that as the like facing the people facing reason of why they're doing this? Because yeah,
Because
any
that would've
normal
made
person would be
sense.
like, "Hey, why are we helping this elf? We don't like her." But see, this way they could be like, "Hey, man, we're gonna go help our fellow man,
Well,
and we're gonna fight evil."
that would work, Ross, if they haven't undermined their trust in Halbrand by making him a criminal and putting him in jail because he abused a bunch of people.
Yeah, but not many people know about that compared to everyone hates elves. Because they could just say like, "Hey, look, he was hiding. He's trying to he's trying to work to get just make a lie, make up a lie. This is the government for God's sakes." Just like he was trying to get the guild crest so he can make money and raise funds for help to help his people. Like just lie. Bay of Pigs this thing. Like just say you're doing a Middle Earth Bay of Pigs. Like just like who like I don't know. It would make so much more sense than a sudden shift and going like, "Nah, we like the knife ear."
Well, your narrative would work better if Halbrand was petitioning this, if he was trying to get them on his side, if they didn't put him in prison and make him out to be this horrible criminal, if there was trust behind this other human in any way, shape, or form. Like, they could have just changed the story. If they were going to do it your way, they could have had him, like, he's smooth talking everybody. He's telling her, he's like, well, I'll show you where...
character.
Well, he'll go, I'll show you where Sauron is. I know where the orcs are hiding. And she's like, well, we got to do this. And then he smooth talks them. He's the one that smooths things over. Whatever she does, she stumbles over and is too abrasive and stuff. And he convinces everybody. But it's like...
Well, and I agree that would work better. But I'm even saying, just in what they've done so far, they could just... Like, you could have Muriel look at Galadriel and be like, I want to help you. I know what I was like. I know that would be the right decision now.
So I'll lie to the people that I'm here to help the Southlands?
Yes. So, and then be like, so what, but what am I going to tell my people? And you can literally do it this dumb. Have them both look at each other and then look over at Halbrand's cell. Just do that. And then it's corny. It's really stupid, but it's a lot better than try like, all right, well, that person we hated and we were super xenophobic against, who kind of publicly disrespected our queen, not the quiet guy next to her, but this blonde a-hole. Well, now we trust her and we're going to help her. What? At least you can make up a lie about the guy who didn't say anything offensive to your queen in a public court.
It's just, they established in this show they're incredibly racist, they're incredibly bigoted, they don't trust anybody off of the island. They even overthrew their king who was trying to reconnect with the elves. The leaves fell. Wow, we gotta go help these people now. What?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've established how bigoted they are, and then you about-faced in the same episode like 20 minutes later.
Mm-hmm.
there's no indication that the omen of the petals falling from the tree is in any way, shape, or form connected to you sending the elf away. None.
No.
And you keeping the elf doesn't mean that the petals aren't going to fall again. It could be that the whole point of the petals falling is that Numenor is going to fall. And it has nothing to do with the elf.
Well,
We have no context here for the omen.
Well, that's the point. If they saw the petals fall and an elf showed up recently, they might be going, well, we need to get rid of her. Go, 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 go.
Right.
It's like the leaves are falling. But they didn't even set the groundwork in a small scene in the last episode or early in this one, or that there's a reverence for the tree, there's a respect for the tree. It's almost like there's an assumption that I watched the movie and that tree's important.
Right.
They're just they're assuming that the audience is going to fill in the blanks on its own.
Why aren't you?
Right?
But don't fill in too many.
Just the ones
Then
we
you won't
want.
like the show because it won't make any goddamn sense. But don't look, just do it. Come on.
This was one of the more egregious episodes, I'd have to say.
It had problems, major problems.
No Harfoots, incidentally.
Oh no!
Which made it better than some other episodes.
Hey, that's rude.
You Harfoot.
I gotta say that when I watched this episode, I thought to myself, at least the Harfoots aren't in it.
Wow, I can't believe you admit that on record.
Closing thoughts on this episode. Silver, go first.
There was a tempest in me.
Terrifying.
It was a
True.
quite a confusing response. I don't know if they thought it was supposed to be inspiring or amazing,
supposed
or
to
they
be
thought
dramatic.
the writing was really good, but the screaming, there's a
Clever.
tempest in me. Yeah.
So quippy.
But like overall, what did you think about the episode watching it, Silver?
This one felt way less put together than the other ones.
Huh.
Felt more disorganized. I don't know. This one was really bad.
All right, Ross.
I can't say much more than that.
No, you're fine.
The jumps in time were really irritating and do not look like they do not portend well for the rest of the show, I'm afraid. The choices made as far as the sudden shifts in like people's motives or whatever, like it's just everything is just so odd. I don't know. It's like they're going for each scene to have its own special moment or like feeling, with none of them really connecting to each other very well, and which leads to the problem with the sudden skips in time and place. And anyway, it was genuinely probably the least good episode so far. Certainly the most confusing as far as what they're trying to do here. So,
Jason.
The logical inconsistencies in this episode were the things that stood out most glaring to me. The fact that she turned her and did a complete 180 on her words after she sends Galadriel away made no sense to me. The other thing that didn't make any sense to me is the dwarves found this amazing metal, and they're miners, and they are craftsmen, and that's their shtick. The whole reason that the gods created the dwarves.
Well,
and
God singular, if you want to be specific.
Not yes, sorry. Anyway, the only reason basically the dwarves were there was to work the work. You know, they knew about metals, they knew about minerals, and regardless of the fact that it would be difficult to mine the mithril, I just don't see the king of the dwarves saying no. I just don't see it. It makes no sense to me at all.
And just
I can see him saying, we need to be careful. We need to be extremely careful. But these are dwarves. That's what they do.
Well, I think it's trying to have the king come across as almost having foresight that it's going to bring about their downfall and we shouldn't be doing it because they're doing a wink and a nod, like, you know where this is, sort of thing.
But that's not the sense that you get from the scene. Does that to me,
Maybe.
this it was just like, no, it's too dangerous. But it doesn't like it's not like he says to his son, look, we can't do this. I have a bad feeling about it. It's just no. My dad says we shouldn't do it because it's dangerous. I was like, this is mining and dwarves we're talking about here.
Just as an aside,
I don't know why they would say no, it's too dangerous.
Just as an aside, they knew Mount Mithril for a long time. It's existed for a long time.
Yeah, they did.
The only reason why Moria is especially different is because it had an uncommonly large amount of it, and Mithril wasn't difficult to mine because it was dangerous. It was difficult to mine because it was commonly very deep in the lore.
Yeah.
So this is very different from the lore. This is a different Mithril. This is completely different. Mithril been around forever. They've seen it in other places. So, all right. This is not how it was established. As far as closing really quick, it's a very vitally important story for progressing the plot. It instigated sort of catalysts to move the plot forward and in directions they want to send it. It's just the reasoning made no sense. There were plot holes and spelling errors, and it had problems. It might be the worst one so far as I'm concerned, because they gave the logic gave very little justification for some of the motives and the decision making that they were doing. So I was not encouraged, and I thought there were problems with what was happening in the show. That being said, gosh dang, we made it through another episode. Get hyped.
Hey.
Get hyped, Ross. Get hyped.
Yay.
Yay. Well, we're moving on to episode 5 next time. Be sure to join us and feel free to drop a comment or...
If you like the show, follow Rhett, Jason, Ross, and Silver, the world's most lethally stupid internet personalities, on Twitter at DG Podcast or on Instagram at Distracted Gamers. If you liked or hated what you heard here today, you can email them at thedistractedgamers@gmail.com and share your feelings. Not that Jason would care, since he hasn't any, of course.
Oh my God, it's so juicy.